Whoops.
Hello, everyone. So we're just having a bit of technical difficulties there. We're not entirely sure why the screen just went black, are we, Andy?
I have no idea.
So
What a
that was a
fantastic
very
start.
smooth transition from countdown to live. And Andy's like, should we just go live? And the answer is yes, we should. So can we just do a quick sound check? Make sure you can all hear us, okay?
Um,
Um,
hello, hello. Can you hear us?
yeah. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear Andy? Are you all having a nice Monday? You can see us now, which is great.
Hey.
Um, See and hear us. Lovely stuff. So tonight, Andy is going to be doing episode 2 of asset creation. We do have episode 1 on our YouTube if anybody wants to go and watch that one before watching this one, or you can watch it live. And Andy, what are you going to be doing tonight? And can you give us a bit of a refresh of what you did last time?
Yeah, I can. Of course I can. A bit too quiet on me. Hold on, let me just turn me up a little bit. Yeah, so last time, as you can see, we uh, we built the asset. Sorry, my brain's all over the place. We built the Bourneville Arch asset. We built that from scratch using some reference images. And today we are going to be taking the model we have built and turning it into a fully textured asset, which should hopefully work in game.
Now, I don't suppose you have the reference image that you had last time, just for anybody who's joining us fresh, so they can see what you've actually made and what you've
Yes.
based it on. So hopefully Andy will be able to get a picture for you all to see what we're aiming for
There we
with
go.
this asset. Yes.
There
So
we
that's
go.
what it looks like, and that's what Andy's making.
Yep.
So what are you going to start with tonight, Andy?
So tonight, we're going to start with the main body of texturing on the asset, which the majority of it is a sort of purple metal. So we're going to focus on that to begin with. I have a fair few of the textures already, so it's going to be a bit of a sort of art attacky kind of here's one I've already done earlier kind of thing. I wanted
Yeah.
to briefly show you the texturing website that I predominantly use to get hold of base textures, which I will then turn into a more of a specific texture that I will need. So we use something called textures.com a lot of the time. This is a great resource for sort of images, textures that have already been set up to be seamless. They've got some alpha brushes in there, which is basically an image that has white and black values. The black will appear transparent and the white values will appear opaque. Is either that or it's the opposite way around. I can't remember. So that's primarily what we use. So what I'm looking for is a metal texture to begin with. So I'm just going to go metal. As we can see on the image, the metal, it looks like a sort of kind of girdery style metal, so there's no galvanization that you can really see, probably due to it being painted. So I'm going to look for just a sort of nice plain metal. I don't know if you want to read any questions or anything whilst I'm having a quick search.
Yeah, so we don't have any questions at the moment, but that is good for me to remind the chat. So if there's anybody watching and you've got some questions about Andy, about his job, what he does, about creating assets, if there's something you want explaining a bit more, please do fire away with the questions in the chat, and Andy will do his best to answer them if he can, won't you?
I will do.
That's if you know the answer, of course.
Yeah, I will do my best. I will do my best. Okay, so I picked a metal. We've gone for a scratch steel. This image here, because this website also is built for people using not so much of a legacy workflow, but a more modern day workflow. They have PBR materials, which comes with a whole host of different channels to make it look like a bit more like the real thing. So you have roughness maps and metallic maps, whereas I'm just looking for the albedo map here, which is the base color, and that's all we really want at the moment. That gives us a nice little texture with some sort of scratches on it, and a bit of a metallic look. So what I will do, I will grab one of these reference images that we've got, if it wants to copy for me.
So just a couple of questions. Scott is asking, is this for Train Sim World 2 or is this for Train Simulator? So this is for Train Simulator, which follows quite nicely into the next question from Crown Witness, which is, hi Natalie and Andy. Does Andy make the railway stations for Train Sim World as well? You don't, do you, Andy? You focus mostly on Train Simulator.
Yes, so I've been drafted in a couple of times to make sort of select assets. I think I made a train station in TSW2, but I primarily focus on Train Simulator, the legacy product, and that's where my expertise lie.
Thunderfire asked, how do you manage to make so many routes?
First off, what a name.
Right.
And secondly, it's a lot of planning. So we, at the start of every project, we will sit down and we will plan a timeline for how long we're going to be spending on each station, what kind of assets we're going to be making. We've moved into a more of a looking for sort of generic style assets. So looking at assets that feature all the way along the route, focusing on them, getting them built first as we're building up the first train station, and then we have basically like a little library of asset that we can populate all the stations as we go through the timeline and build that out.
And for anybody that missed episode 1, what route is this for? This particular asset, what would it go in?
So this would go in the Cross City route. This was released earlier on in the year, I believe.
What did you just do? You made it look really cool.
So what I've just done there, let me double back a little bit. So I've added a second layer.
Yeah.
And I've taken the eyedropper tool, which is this little one, which means I can grab. It's because I copied this in. Which means I can grab a color on an image. I've grabbed a new layer. I've painted that all purple, and then I'm going to be changing the layer value to multiply. There are loads of different sort of options that you can use, some more appropriate than others for different kinds of thing. But multiply basically just allows the values of lower layers to come through, and since we're using a block color, it brings through sort of the metallic-y kind of scratches quite nicely. And that's primarily how I kind of do very quick recolors of textures. So I'd say I've got a red metal here, but I want a green metal. It's just going in, adding another layer, and adjusting the layers with multiply and overlay. So we've got our purple. I will bring one up because I've already got one already saved. So here's one we did earlier. It's a little bit closer to the purple of the Bourneville arch. It does take a little bit of adjusting, as things don't quite display on your screen as they do in game. So
by doing it a little bit earlier, does that mean you're going to be able to show off something slightly more accurate for everybody?
Yeah, hopefully that's the case. First thing I am going to do though, which I've noticed, which is frustrating me a touch, is I'm just going to shrink this down a little bit.
Scott's asking, how do you make the shadowing in game so when you see an object from different views, the shadow moves?
So there's a couple of different ways that we do shadows in game. So we use a layer called ambient occlusion, which couples most of our textures. That basically is, I'm trying to think of a good example. Have I got something that's a quite a good example just around me? So say I've got my portable hard drive case here. If you were to have this sat on a surface, you have a shadow that sits along the bottom of the case, and we would bake that shadow that's underneath here into a texture. So that shadow is unlikely to move at all with a sun movement. Whereas a shadow that's where I've got my lights here, there's a shadow sitting around the back towards me. That would be generated by the in-game sunlight. So that will change over time. So there's a couple of different shadows working at the same time on each object.
Mm-hmm.
If that answers your question.
I think I'm about to sneeze.
Bless you. Cabbage.
Now I've said it. It's gone, actually. It's just... Oh, it's tickliness. Let's have a look. The Gaming Bros said, can you please do... No, yeah, please do Glasgow to Edinburgh in the memory of my grand's dog Rasta. And I think the mods gave you the link to the forums to post that suggestion. Yeah, please take any suggestions over to the forums. And yes, give us the reasons why.
Absolutely. Right. Let me just turn this into a multi-layer. No, I need to go up one layer. So we have our base color at the moment. Just remove a few of these. I think we'll only need 4. So we have our base color. So I have to make sure that all the bits that I want to be purple are set to the according number. So the way I work is I will use multi-sub objects. This is a type of texturing where you can have one material, which is this little sphere here, and in that material it has a bunch of different textures associated with it. This can be kind of as large a number as you want, but the maximum I tend to use on a material is 10. That's the absolute maximum, and that's on something like a large station. Sometimes it will creep up to 11 and 12, but it doesn't go anywhere further than that, really. So I have to make sure that the geometry I want to use this material is set to the appropriate ID, and each material has its own separate ID associated with it. I'm just going to call this Bourneville Arch, and then we're going to go into this purple metal material, and we're just going to call it purple metal.
Original name.
Absolutely, right. Okay, so that is set to 1. So now just to apply this material, I will apply it just to the metal first, so we don't get a bunch of black metal all over the place. If I drag that on, that should... Why are you not doing what I want you to?
It's because there's many people watching, so naturally it's not going to behave itself.
Yeah,
those are the rules,
To
Andy.
put the pressure on now. Right. So here we go. Even though I've been doing this for a while, I still make mistakes. So one thing I missed here was I didn't show my material in viewport. Just click that on and it will activate the material. So these are going to be something a little bit different. So I'm just going to go into here, select all the faces in here, and make sure they're a different number. Yes.
So you have to number them all?
So every piece of topology will need a material ID.
Right.
Depending on what you're using, that may just, or what kind of material you're using, it may be that it needs a material ID, or it could just be that you've got a single texture map, like a single sphere that only has one material associated with it, and then at that point it wouldn't need one because it will default to whatever the material is.
Yeah.
But for using multi-sub objects, we will need material IDs. Right. So we've got our purple metal. We have our base purple metal. So we've got half of it there. Oh, the lamp's also got a purpley metal on it. So I want to associate that with 1. The interior is a slightly different color, so it's more of a cream. So I will probably go in and add that as well. That I will probably have to go find though. So one thing I did want to say is, if you're making things for your own game, with things like this, a bespoke asset that's maybe just one asset, you probably get away with as big a texture map as you kind of want. I think Train Simulator, the legacy product, offers up to 2048 by 2048, I believe. It might even work with 4K textures, but with tiling textures like this purple metal, we tend to use 512 by 512. As long as it is divisible by 8, then it should work. So you could even use a texture that was 512 by 256, so it's longer, but both numbers are still divisible by 8, so that would be fine.
So for anybody watching this for the first time, obviously this is taking you a bit longer than it traditionally would, because we've been chatting throughout, and you've paused a few times to like talk to the chat and stuff like that. But how long would it normally take you, like give us an estimate, to create this asset?
So this kind of asset, I could probably do it fairly comfortably if I was working nice and quickly. I could probably do it within an hour, quite comfortably, I reckon. And because it's used throughout the station a few times, that means I've done a big chunk of my bespoke work in a very sort of short period of time. Yeah, I think it'd only take about an hour. Maybe I'd creep over a little bit, but an hour would be quite a comfortable amount of time to do it in. I'm trying to find a good option for this cream, but I'm not going to find it. So what instead I'm going to do is I'm going to take the metal we had from before. I'm going to remove our purple layer, and then I'm just going to add a different layer. I'm going to grab a sort of brownie cream instead.
Okay.
I will make that a bit more of a cream instead. Peach. It looks a bit more peachy, actually.
It does look a bit peach, doesn't it?
It's a bit of peach.
Oh, it looks less peach now.
Yeah, now we've multiplied it. I think that's a bit closer to the colour I'm kind of looking for. So we're going to save this out into.
Mr. Quicko is asking, what rank artist is Andy? So it's probably better to answer, how long have you been working as part of the art team, or the asset creation team at Dovetail?
So I have been working for the asset creation team in TS1 since October the 14th, 2019 is the first day I started after being in QA. So I've been working on TS1 for about a year and a half now, nearly 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, nearly 2 years now. We're getting there.
You're getting there to 2 years. You're getting there.
Yeah. We're creeping on the 2 years.
You are. It'll be 2 years before you know it.
Time is flying by at the moment.
Right.
It's absurd. I can't believe how quickly the weeks are going.
So BT said, can you show us a station building?
I could do.
Imagine that would be very time consuming.
It will take a little bit of time because I'd have to get it set up. So we'll focus on this. But if you're interested in any stations that I have made myself, I would say check out the recently released Dresden route and have a little look at Riser Station. That's one I previewed during the first appearance on the Dovetail live stream, which is one that I created. So go have a little look at that. That's part of my work if you're interested.
Everyone's gonna go there and be like, "That's Andy's station."
I hope so. That would make me very proud.
Scott has said, Andy, what's been the hardest or longest project you've had to do? Now, is that the same one, or could that be two different routes? Because one could be long and easy, and the other could have been quite challenging and very fast.
Um, Sorry, what were the two questions? It was the longest and the hardest.
Yes.
Okay, I if I'm gonna pick one of them, it's probably gonna apply to both of them, and that would have to
Okay.
be West Coast Main Line. That was the largest route that I'd been part of. I was fairly fresh to the team. We just entered lockdown as well, um, and the art team grew fairly small very
Hmm.
quickly. So I had a lot more responsibility. So it was kind of like a trial by fire, and there were a lot of fairly sizable stations on that route. So I would have to say West Coast Main Line,
Yeah.
hands down. Although Cross City was a very very short development period, so that was very tough as well. But West Coast Main Line was a whole
Yeah.
other beast.
BT is asking, how do you make station names? No, sorry. Yeah, station sign names.
Station sign names. So I make them very similar to the way I'm making this asset. Um, so I will create a generic sign, or
Hmm.
roughly, if the station signs look very similar along a route, especially with German routes, they use the same sort of plates. We will make the sign plate as it is, and then we will have a font that we use across all the station names, because they tend to use the same font along a whole route. And then we will just change the font in a Photoshop file, and adjust the names accordingly to what we need. And we use an alpha channel, so that will cause all the texture that's around the sign name. Although no, we wouldn't even need to, because I'm saving them out as separate textures. Ignore that alpha channel. I'm talking rubbish. I'm talking rubbish.
Talking rubbish.
I'm talking rubbish. I do that quite a lot. Okay, so what I'm doing here, this one is a little bit different. So I've used, for the past two textures we've used, the cream metal and the purple metal, I've used a shader called Train Light Map with Diffuse. This is a fairly basic shader. This will give me two slots that will allow me to input a diffuse color, and it will also allow me to input a shadow map in the second slot. The shadow maps we will do at the very end. We'll do a light bake, and apply all them afterwards. The way I probably should have done it is set up a file and then save all the files and slot textures, and then I can duplicate that down, and that will already have the texture already in there, rather than me going in and then manually inputting all of them at the end. But
Hmm.
hindsight is a wonderful thing. So
Isn't it just?
yeah, so this one, because we're making a sort of see-through glass, this one we are going to be using a texture or a shader called Train Glass. This will basically give the object that has the material associated with this material, it will allow it to be sort of semi-transparent. So it will appear as though it is kind of a pane of glass, I should say.
That's cool. That's cool.
And then the final texture is going to be our detailing. So, as we can see on the asset here, we have all this wonderful detailing.
Yeah. Sorry, I just like literally tried to move closer to my screen to see the detailing. Then it's like it's gonna help. You're the one in
I can
control.
zoom in if you want.
I want to see it.
let me make it nice and large then. Okay, there we go. As big as I can make it. There we go. See all the wonderful detailing now. So we've got all this wonderful detailing, and thanks to Duncan Seeley for taking these images on a nice cloudy day, because we have now a very nice clean background with which to cut these out of. With something where there are trees, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Not too much. It just means it's a little bit more manual work rather than automatic work.
Yep.
But with something that's a clean plate like this, we can kind of go in. I can just use the magic wand tool, and it should cut out the majority of the color I select. Let me grab this, and we'll see if I can't give you a little demonstration of that tool I'm speaking of.
Yes, please. You've mentioned it. I want to see the magic.
Yeah. So over here on the left-hand side in the toolbar, we have the magic wand tool. Quick key binding is W.
Oh, my face is covering whatever you're showing, I think.
No, it's just next to your face.
Oh, yes, it is just next to my face.
Just next to your face. So this little tool here.
Yep.
And then if I go in and I can click on a nice grey sky, and that should make quite a nice clean edge. The sort of dotted lines of the edge that it's created makes quite a nice clean edge around the whole model, whole image. And then I can go in and I can just press delete, and that should then remove that in the background. I'm going to just give this background a bit of colour just so you can see what's
has it just made it go white instead of like the cloudy colour?
Yeah. So I could even remove this background so you can just see the checkerboard instead. So instead of the cloudy colour, it is now whatever is on the layer below, and I can do this with all of them, making sure I don't select anything I'm not meant to.
Now we're all watching. It's like, this is where you delete something you shouldn't, you know.
You can ask them if there's any questions anyone wants to ask right now. Now would be a
anybody
great
got
time,
any questions?
because this is a nice tedious point.
What are you talking about? You have to concentrate really, really hard.
Yeah, no, it's not tedious at all.
But yes, if you do have any questions, please do ask them. So you're going to have to click on all the little bits as well, like all the really intricate parts.
Yeah, so all these little intricate parts I will have to click on. One way I could do it instead, which is probably what I should have done. So that's one way you can do it, or I can do the select option, and I can select color range. This will also give me an eyedropper tool, and I can select which colors I wish. So we want this nice grey sky, and I'm going to have the fuzziness probably about 40, where we did have it before. That just takes a little bit of adjustment, depending on the contrast of your image. You'll have to sort of scale up and down that and figure out what is appropriate.
Ooh, we've had a couple of questions.
Oh.
So BT is asking, will it make it 3D? So this is 3D, isn't it?
Yeah, so we will be transforming this into a 3D object, so it should make it nice and 3D.
And we've got a question from Callum, which is, if there's damage on the structure, do you include the damage or do you fix it using the software? Now, I guess a good example of that is actually the light, right? Because it's technically damaged.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you fix it or do you include the damage?
So due to the sort of really tight time constraints that we have, we tend to make things fairly clean, unless it is a major permanent bit of damage. I'm more likely to model things in a clean kind of fixed way. So with this light, since this is the only light that has a bit of damage, and it is a fairly small part of the full station, I will model this just clean, because the rest of the arches don't have any damage on it, so they kind of outweigh this little bit of damage. But if, say for example, there was a bridge that had a massive missing chunk out of it, I'm probably likely to model something like that.
Okay, yeah. And I assume that's if it's something that had been there for a significant amount of time as well, not something that had recently happened.
Yeah. So it says, it's quite an important bit of damage that was done during history or something like that, or during
Yeah.
a period of history. I would then model that as well.
Mr. Quicko asked, how did you get into asset creation?
So I went to the University for the Creative Arts in Farnham, and doing a computer games arts course. Not really knowing what I wanted to do with games. I just knew that I was really, really passionate about video games and really wanted to make video games. And I kind of just sort of found the speciality of 3D modeling, really enjoyed it, and kind of just sort of funneled into that. So it wasn't a sort of a particular thing that pushed me there. It was I'd tried a bunch of different mediums throughout the games industry whilst I was at uni, and I found that 3D modeling fit me very nicely.
That's nice. That like it wasn't just a light bulb moment. It was just sort of like you tried lots of different things until you found what you liked.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew that I wanted to be in the games industry, and so it was just finding what I was good at. And I found that I was quite good at 3D modeling, so that was what I went with. So I'm going to do a bit of an art attack thing here. So
here's one we did earlier.
Yeah. So what we need to do now is we need to cut out all of these sections nicely. I'm doing it very quickly because I'm going to adjust this in a minute, just so I can show you the modifier. So because this is taken at a slight angle, what I would have to do is go into adjustments, transform down here in edit, and I would want to adjust the perspective. So what this does is this gives me the ability to, let me deselect these.
Oh, I see.
Deselect the selection, there we go. So the ability to adjust things, kind of make things larger.
Move it about as you like.
Yeah, kind of move about as I like. There's a few different tools, such as skew, and this will make things sort of larger. If it's off at an angle like that, I can bring it right forward, kind of as I wish, and make it a bit more flat on and straight for use as an actual texture. So there's a few of these around the station. They all have different nameplates, so I have grabbed all of them and set up a little texture for us.
Pep EMU fan is asking, can you affect the bulb so it lights up? Is there a technique in doing so?
There is indeed. We will come to that very soon. So please be
spoilers.
Patient. Spoilers. Yeah, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We will get to that. Don't you worry. I'm not
right. So what are we looking at now?
So what we're looking at now is all of these textures cut out and skewed as well. The actual nameplates were a little bit difficult to get hold of, so I found a text that kind of fits them, and I've made my own little font, so they look a bit more 3D. Excuse me. So now what we're going to do, I will say this is not an amazing use of texture space, so when you're making a texture you want to make sure you fill as much of the texture space as possible, but due to these being arched it makes it a little bit difficult to squeeze them in nicely. So with the time constraints I had, this was kind of as nice as I could get it. So what we want to do is we want to bring this into here. So I will go into our arch detailing here. I will find said texture. We've got our arch detail, and then we're going to grab all these bits and assign them to selection. I'm going to collapse these so they are a single object, and that means I can adjust. Make sure they're in editable poly. It means I can adjust all of the polygons at once. One thing I will go back here and say is when you're doing something where you have cutouts, so where we have these sort of white sections, we're not going to want them to display. Here is the alpha channel that I was talking about earlier.
Right.
So I'll give it the RGB, and this will give you a basic black and white value. So everything that is in white will display as an opaque texture, and everything that is in black will be transparent.
Right.
And this is how the game engine reads sort of transparent textures and stuff. So if you see a nameplate that looks like it's hovering, it's likely that it is just a plane, and it's got a texture over it that has this kind of thing on it. So there are white sections and there are black sections to cut out the texture.
Didi Nanana has asked, do you normally, some of these names tonight, you guys, do you normally create the texture file first or build it as you build the model? So obviously tonight you've been very prepared, but is this how you would normally like tackle a project, or like they asked, is it something you gradually do?
So I being taught by the wonderful master I did have, Mr. Derek Siddle, I've been taught to make the texture first, and then you make the model afterwards. I do a lot of planning on my sketchbook, so I will draw out the texture, whereabouts things are going to be in the texture. So say I have a brick wall with a window, I have a brick wall with a door, I will draw out a very quick sketch as to where they will be in the texture. So I look at how an asset can be broken down into modular chunks that I can make. Say I'm making a building, I need one bit of brick wall that has a door in it, I have one bit of brick wall that's got a window in it, and then I can just duplicate them round in a square, and then I have a full floor of a building already. So I primarily will build the texture first, and then I will go and build the model. As well, I can take that texture, I can texture one little chunk. Say I've got that door and that window asset. I apply the texture to that. I then make the model with the texture, and then I have a chunk of assets already textured. I don't then have to go in and texture every little bit. It's basically already done when I build the building.
That's handy.
Yeah, so it's much easier working that way, I find.
Yeah. Spot the Dogs asked, what do you guys use for asset creation? So yeah, what is this page you've got open, I guess, and is it the only one you can use? So
for TS1, or for both TS1 and TSW, the predominant modeling software that we use is 3ds Max. It works with all the shaders that we have and the coding that's been set up so that we can do very specific things with our modeling software. However, on the fishing side of things, they use Maya, because Maya is a lot better at making much more organic models, and very sort of smooth, fleshy kind of things like fish and humans, whereas Max is very, very good at hard surface modeling, which is very, very handy when you're making train stations. So it
all depends on what you're creating, really.
Kind of, yeah, but it's also a bit of personal preference. You can do both things with both different bits of software. Just one is a bit better at one thing than the other, kind of thing. So they're a little bit specialized in what they do. And the screen I have up right now, this is the Unwrap UV editor. So this basically will give me a flat image of the geometry we have. It will allow me to see what we have in 3D space on a 2D plane. And I can then adjust that to fit our texture that we have brought in.
We have a good question from Joshua, actually. For anybody that isn't even, we're talking like everybody just knows what asset creation is and what you do. But for somebody that has no idea, how would you explain what is asset creation What do you do
Oh, that's a tough one.
in layman's terms?
In layman's terms, so in layman's terms, I help craft a 3D environment that the players can enjoy a world that they feel has a sense of realism to it.
Hmm.
So asset creation is basically just building a virtual environment.
And can you give an example of some of the assets that you have made? Just some simple ones.
There are quite a lot. So I've made a Metro newspaper box. I've made Watford Junction station building. I've made riser. I've made canopies. I've made lampposts, bins. Kind of the things that you see around, say for example, a train station, that you don't really think about. They're just
Yeah.
parts of the world. I have to look in great detail. Like, oh, there's a bin there. There's a lamppost there. There's a sign there. So yeah, I've made a whole plethora of things, from signs to lampposts to buildings. The list goes on.
And I'm sure, like when you're playing, it's very easy to not take notice of things like that because, you expect to see them. But I'm sure if they weren't there, it would sort of be glaringly obvious that there weren't
100%.
lampposts, there weren't the bins.
Excuse me. Yeah, 100%. It's something that is a small, a really small part of the world that, yeah, as you say, you don't really notice, but if they weren't there, you would really notice.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we want it to be. You don't want the player to be looking at all these. If they're frequenters of the world and they really enjoy looking at all the little details, then that's lovely to hear, because I feel very proud that people will go around and appreciate the work we all put in. But it's the kind of stuff that helps you get into that realistic virtual world subconsciously. So you're not you see it kind of out your peripheral vision. Just
It makes it more immersive.
100%. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It makes it more immersive. Yeah, absolutely.
So, where are we up to?
So currently we are just adjusting some UVs. We are currently doing this little bit in the middle. You'll probably see as I'm adjusting them, things stretching and skewing.
Yeah.
This is how the software reads what we have here in the 2D world in a 3D space. So it's reading it based on where I'm putting these lines. So if I was to put a line, say this little bit at the end, I was put it all up here. This shape on the 2D space is not representative or indicative of what we have in the 3D world. So it gets all skewed and you get all weird lines and stuff. So you want to make sure that things look kind of how they should do in the 2D world, and then you get nice straight lines most of the time. Not always the case, I will say that.
I love them.
Yeah.
That's someone who's been bitten.
Too many times. Oh dear.
Joshua C is asking, with the asset files, can you use them to 3D print? As I have a 3D printer and I'd like to print a train or something like that. So is that something that can be done with this or not? Is it a different type of 3D creation for 3D printers?
So I don't know if you'd be able to extract the files from in-game, but with something that you downloaded off of, what's the website? I can't remember, but there are different websites who have 3D assets that you can download and print. Mm-hmm. I believe you need a file type called STL for 3D printing. They, I believe, primarily use OBJs to transfer into STL files. I'm not 100% sure how you change OBJ files or FBX files into STL files for 3D printing, but as long as you can get a 3D model file and turn it into an STL file, you should basically be able to 3D print it.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, yeah. You might need to go in and add supports and stuff, so that it prints properly. But I don't own a 3D printer myself. I know a few people who do, so I've not really had the experience myself yet.
Kevin McGowan's asked, is the model rotated to the correct angle before exporting it into the root?
Gosh, he's so cheeky.
Or is it done in the root editor? Now, why has that made you laugh?
Kevin McGowan is one of our colleagues.
Okay.
And we were discussing model rotations earlier today. Kevin,
that's mean.
What I would do is I would make sure that the model is rotated to the correct orientation before I export it into game to save the root editors the pain of using a legacy rotation. But I mean, that is personal preference, really. I find that it's much for me. It's easier, even though it's a bit of a pain to model. Say, for example, we have. So, what he's talking about really is when we export the station models from in game, they come out with a certain orientation. So by that I mean they are a certain rotation. So if you can see my mouse here, the two platforms would run sort of diagonally across this grid here. That is the longitude and latitude they have in game, which is realistic to real life. Those numbers. So it is on the correct rotation, and then if we take that export from in the 3D software and I put that back into the game, that will come in exactly the same angle, same rotation, and that then saves us sort of bugs where a train might clip a platform edge or something like that, where the root builders have had to go in and if we've rotated it in Max and then the root builders have to go in and rotate it, their tools are not quite as fine-tuned as we have in 3ds Max. So we were able to get it a lot more accurate to the specific rotation that we kind of need to hopefully stop trains clipping platforms.
Atomic Danny said the bigger the station, the harder it is to match the angle. Is that true?
Yeah, so when you get to stations such as, say, Riser Bahnhof, that I keep coming back to, that is a 9 or 10 station platform, might even be 11. When you're rotating at a large scale to accurately match all of the platforms is rather difficult. The legacy tools are, like I say, not quite as fine-tuned as a piece of modeling software. So to hit really accurate specific numbers is nigh on impossible. Whereas with a bit of modeling software, right down the bottom, let me minimize that for a second. Right down the bottom here, I have readouts X, Y, Z, and I can accurately type in a very specific number, and it will go to that exact rotation for me.
Chewy the Husky's asking, do you guys visit the stations for reference, or do you use Google, or if not Google, do you use other reference?
So I've just looked at this asset and this section looks horrible. So what we do is we will go to the station to take images if we can. However, due to the recent events of the past year, we haven't been able to do that, which has been a bit of a shame. We've been very, very lucky with Cross City, Duncan Seeley. That was his local route, so he was very, very kind and went away and did a lot of reference shots for us and took a lot of reference videos around the whole station, which I am internally grateful for, because that made my modelling job so much easier. But if we aren't able to get to a station or a route, for example, then Google Images and Flickr and these sorts of online resources are our friend. are one of our only friends. So with routes that are in Germany, I think Germany has some weird privacy laws or something. So they don't have a lot of Street View on Google Maps,
Right.
or in using Google Earth, they don't have a lot of 3D views. So it makes it a lot harder to visualize those kind of routes as they are. But we get by. Sometimes there's a little bit of what's the word, sort of artistic flair in there, where you kind of have to maybe make it up a little bit.
If you've struggled particularly.
Yeah, if we really could not find a reference,
Yeah.
then I would go with the very little reference I have and kind of think how it would be built in real life, or how it should be built, and I will go around and kind of make it like that. But yeah, it really does depend on the route and the current plague that is going on in your local area.
Yeah, I'm hoping soon that'll make getting reference a lot easier for everybody.
Oh yeah, especially with German routes. The German routes, really, the reference just non-existent. So if we can get someone out to Germany to take images, I will be a very happy bunny.
So, are you doing the right one now? Yeah, to make it all fit properly.
Yeah, so now I'm doing the right one. To align it all. Apologies for this being so tedious. This is the boring bit.
No, it's fine. It gives us a good idea of how long it actually takes you. But I do imagine it's a bit harder doing it on stream with everybody watching.
It's not too bad. This kind of UV adjustment is not something I would normally do a lot. With very bespoke, specific things like this, I tend to do this. But with something that's a bit more generic, such as the purple metal here, I will use something called a UVW box map, which will apply. I'll tell you what. Before we finish this, I'll show you quickly. So if I go here, we take all the metal points. If I go UVW map, and we go box map, this will apply a box around the entire model, and this is basically a visual representation of the texture being applied on all those different sides. So if you imagine a camera looking at each of those different sides of the box, it is projecting a representation of that texture onto that side, which then gets displayed on the model. You can't quite see it, but it means that all your detail kind of wraps around wraps around the model, and is the correct. It's not skewed or stretched or anything. It's all kind of as it should be. So that's what we use for tiling textures, is what we call them. And that's a texture where it's just a small plane, and if you duplicate it side by side, it would seamlessly go together. If that answers your questions.
Yes, do we have any more questions for Andy? Not from people who work with him.
I appreciate it, guys. I do appreciate it. I'm feeling the love tonight from my colleagues.
Yeah. 3D's asking, what would be the benefit of using a box map over the cylindrical map?
So a box map, I would use a box map I would still use a cylindrical map if I was doing a cylinder. So a box map is ideally for things that got like 90-degree angles. So like we have the girder that runs all the way around the arch here. That's 4 90-degree angles that come back on themselves. So they're creating a box. Whereas if it was something like a cylinder, say for example, This light at the bottom here, I would maybe use a cylinder map.
Okay.
With a cylinder, one of the main differences are your texture seams. So if your texture isn't, or if your UV, which we have here, isn't perfectly aligned to this entire square, if it was maybe off by a little bit, when it then reached the end, say we had down here, we've got where the texture is cut, or where the model is cut, and then the texture displays all the way around here and wraps all the way around and comes back, and this is where it would end. If it was perfectly aligned, they would seamlessly go together and look like there was no seam. However, if it's off by a little bit, you will see where that detail just all of a sudden cuts and changes. And so cylindrical maps are quite good for cylinders, as long as you can hide the texture seam section of the cylinder around, say, from the other side. And that kind of works with that. So yeah, they're both useful in their own sort of particular circumstances.
Another question from Chewy the Husky is, have you ever had any route that was so hard to model that you had to turn around and say, hold on guys, how are we going to do this? Yeah, have you ever had anything where you're like, oh no, oh gosh, this is actually a lot harder than we thought? Or no, if you haven't, that's also allowed.
Cross City was like that. Looking at a lot of the stations, they were fairly simple stations, so 2 platforms, a fairly small local station. However, due to the way the landscape is in Birmingham and around Birmingham, there are a lot of embankments and embedded stations and difficult terrain to work with, more than the station itself actually being difficult. But at the end of the day, we have to make the stations. So we look at the stations and think, how do we make that? Not, we can't make that. It's more, how can we do this? And a lot of our job is problem solving and figuring out how we do things, rather than sort of looking at what we're limited to. So we're always learning.
We're not going to be able to do this. It's more of a, all right, let's see what we can do to make this work.
100%. Yeah, that is a lot of our job, is figuring out how we can make things work. Which is very satisfying a lot of the time.
Yeah, especially if something's been challenging.
Yeah, 100%. When something is challenging and then you get a real nice representation of it, it's very, very satisfying. Very satisfying.
It must be nice for you as well when like a route is complete and stuff, and then you go into it and you see like all your hard work in the game and stuff like that.
Oh, especially with something like West Coast Main Line, because that was such a long route. That was incredibly satisfying when it was done, and we could do a little bit of testing, and I was running up and down the route and going through all the stations I'd made. That was unbelievably satisfying.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, as a kid, I always looked at these, playing video games. You look at something like Crash Bandicoot or Spyro or Total War or sort of any game that people play when they were kids. You think, I'd love to make stuff, and think, look, that's mine. And now I go through and I'm playing a video game. And it's like I made that, and there's a sense of pride and sort of achievement that you get from that, and especially from. I sometimes will nip into other people's streams when we release a product. Yeah, I'll nip into other people's streams, release a product, especially with Cross City. I did it. I hopped into someone's stream, and our coder left a little Easter egg where myself and the coder are sat in the train. So I'm the only NPC with a beard in Train Simulator, and so there's the two of us sat in a little loco. And just he was going through Bourneville at the time, and was really. This main reason why I picked the arch, because he saw the arch, he was like, "This is really cool. Like, look at this little bit of detail." And seeing people appreciate your work, there's a little lump that sticks in your throat. It's nice. It's real enjoyable to know that I'm doing something that is enjoyed by other people. That gives me, to know people are happy with my work, gives me great happiness.
I have this image of you as well. Like, say someone was playing the game and you were sat next to them, you'd just be like, "I made that," and then like they go, "I also made that."
I mean, hopefully I wouldn't be that, invasive in their gaming experience, but that probably would be the case now, if I'm going to be honest. Right, okay, so just before, it looks like we might have to wrap up soonish, but just before we go, what I'm doing now, someone asked earlier, is I am applying a texture called a train emissive glow. Now this is what we use when we want an asset to have a sort of glowy look about it. Say for example, lampposts at night. So because this is a lamp and it will display at night, what I've done, I've taken the glass section and I've just duplicated it down into its own little separate object.
Oh, I see.
Now this little separate object will have the suffix _night to it. This means it will only display when the game goes past a certain point in time. Please ignore these horribly aligned things. I will fix them for next stream, I promise.
Is it killing you that it's not perfect?
Really killing me. It's really killing me. All the lines are skew with and wobbly and it's driving me crazy, but I will fix that for next stream, I promise. So we will take a separate object, we'll give the suffix _night. That means it will display, I believe it's 8 o'clock in game, that things that have the _night suffix will activate and they will become displayed in the game world. They're technically always there in game, you just can't see them until it hits a certain time in game. And then what I will do, I will apply a train emissive glow shader, and this will basically make things glow, like I said. And then I want a lamp emissive texture. This is basically just a very plain texture, nothing to it. It's basically just a colour, which won't let me zoom in, which is amazing. I really want to zoom in.
Atomic Danny has put in brackets the lights.
The lights, yes, all the lights. All the lights will activate at a certain time. So this is for the person that was asking earlier, how do you get the lights to go on at night? This is how we get the lights to go on at night. So we have a slightly separate object and they have a slightly different suffix.
Kevin has just said the lights in game come on at different times depending on the time of year. Is that true?
Interesting. It might be. I'm not 100% sure. It could well be because the game's set up to get, I believe it's set up to get darker a bit earlier in winter. That probably would be the case. Yeah. It's probably,
we're going to need to find that out.
Yeah, that'll be something we'll have to feed back. But Kevin is a veteran of Train Simulator, so I'm sure he knows. I'm sure he knows best. Right. Okay. Well.
So, what is still left to go on this? Because it still isn't finished. During the next episode, what have you still got to do?
So, next episode, what we're going to do is we're going to take this asset that we now have, and we're going to take it into a light baking scene. This is where I will apply that shadow I was talking about with my hard drive case. We will apply that subtle shadow to the whole object. And then after that, we will take it into the blueprint editor, do a little bit of testing, make sure it's all working correctly. If there's things broken, I will go back and we'll do a bit of troubleshooting, and then we are basically done.
Oh wow, so there's not much left to do.
There's not a whole amount left to do, but the last 10% does always take quite a long time.
Yeah.
And
you also need to fix those wonky lights.
Yeah, and I need to fix those wonky lights, so we will be doing that as well, I imagine. Yeah. But we can. So
yeah, that'll be it for tonight, I guess.
Yeah, and then if I finish it early next stream, then we could probably spend a bit of time answering questions and
we can absolutely do. Yeah. So thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. Thank you to Andy for going through so much of how you create the asset and stuff like that, and answering so many questions.
Oh, thank you for keeping me sane during this period.
You're welcome. And also, cheers to your colleagues that did pop by. I know it's appreciated.
Yes, thank you for the tormenting. Yeah, real appreciated.
He does appreciate it. So tomorrow it will be another roadmap stream. Wednesday is Workshop Wednesday, and then on Thursday we have the Cane Creek preview. So I will see everybody tomorrow, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Good night from me.
Have a wonderful evening, all. Good night from me.